Breaking news we brought to you just a few moments ago. President Trump just posting on Truth Social a little while ago. Here's what he said. I have long ago informed Tim Cook of Apple. I expect their iPhones will be sold in the United States of America, will be manufactured, built in the United States, not India or any place else. If that is not the case, a tariff of at least 25% must be paid by Apple to the U.S. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So this really hit the stock in the pre-market. Take a look at Apple right now. It is down almost 3%, so it's come back. But at one point, it was down almost 4% on this news. I want to bring in Gatestone Institute senior fellow and author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, Gordon Chang, on set with us this morning. Gordon, your reaction to this? This is a pretty heavy push by Trump.
Well, it certainly is. Ultimately, yes, we'd like iPhones and iPads and all the rest of it to be made in the U.S. But this is a win to have it made in India. When you had the May 1st announcement by Tim Cook that the majority of iPhones for the U.S. would be made in India and iPads and other devices would be made in Vietnam, that's a victory for us. And I think President Trump should take it. Now, Apple has the most difficult to move supply chain of any company. So they're not going to be able to automatically start making them in this country tomorrow. I think that Trump should give them a little bit of time. And as I said, this is really important to get it out of China. So let's take our wins while we have them. At
least they're trying to get it out, John Lonsky. They're trying to get it out of China. Because you made the point in the commercial break. Look, if you threw iPhone production into the U.S. now, which physically isn't completely possible, right, iPhones would be $2,000, $3,000.
That's correct. And American consumers and American voters would not be happy with that. So Trump has to be careful with his trade policy not to push it so hard that consumer prices soar to levels that prove to be politically devastating to the Republican Party.
What do you say?
Yeah, just to follow up with what John said, I mean, our lives are these phones. And I think more so than almost any other thing that government can mess with, if they mess with the phone, there could be repercussions at the ballot box, and especially going into 2026, where the Democrats are handing Trump a gift horse right now because they cannot get their act together. There is a chance that Donald Trump and the Republican Party go against normal history and actually win in the midterms. If you start messing with people's phones, I think you kill that gift horse.
The interesting piece, though, I want to bring up, though, real quick, is that if you look at the post from Trump, he's saying Apple has to pay for that tariff. So my thinking is he's saying you eat the cost. You don't pass it on to consumers, because he told Walmart, eat the cost of the tariffs. Walmart said, we can't completely do that. You know, business is business. Target, we also heard Gordon say, we're not completely sure what we're going to do. Real quick.
Yeah. One thing, though, you know, manufacturing in the U.S. is not as expensive as most people think. And the reason is it's automation, it's AI. And that's going to take the labor cost out of it. And when you don't have transportation costs across the Pacific, it's going to be OK. So I'm not sure it's going to be triple the cost, but, you know, we're at a point where the U.S. manufacturing, I think, is going to flourish, and we're going to see that fairly soon, but not as soon as Trump wants.
Yeah. John, real quick.
Yeah, I think, Trump keeps telling these companies, you can't pass on higher costs. Boy, you know, this brings back memories of Joe Biden telling grocery chains not to pass on the higher costs that they were facing, the final prices for groceries. I mean, it's up to the companies, the businesses, to decide how to go ahead and price their products. They don't need help from the President of the United States.
Well, we're going to watch Apple stock throughout the day. Again, the breaking news, wanted to bring this in. Thank you, Gordon, for commenting on that. Let's talk about also the big news with China and the United States, because they're going to have, they had their first call yesterday since they had the Geneva meeting, and they agreed to keep lines of communication opening, and they say there's more high-level engagement that's going to happen, try to get this broader deal going. This is the tariff story. But China told the World Trade Organization that trade talks with the U.S. were an important step, but what is really needed was to find a way out of global trade turmoil. You've got a new op-ed that says that President Trump let China win the first round in the tariff war. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think Trump wanted to avoid China on a collision course. So he offered them an off-ramp, saying, look, this is a way for you to settle your relations, not just with the United States, but with the rest of the world. So I think it was Trump taking a generous, sort of broader view of things. You know, everyone says, oh, you know, he caved in. Well, no, I don't think so. I think he actually meant that this was going to be a way for China to come to terms with the U.S.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how these discussions play out. As you've always told us, China does not play fair. I think we know that. But, you know, Marie and I both talked about this. The fact that they won't even give their economic data out anymore. What does that really tell you about the shape of their economy right now when you've got protests happening at their factories across the country? That says to me Uprising is coming, to be
Uprising is not only coming, it's also here. And it's not just the workers. It's also bank depositors right now. Chinese economy is contracting. We see this from the price data for February, March, and April. The country's in a deflationary spiral. That's an economy killer, and that is inconsistent with their reports of 5.4% growth in Q1. So China's at a weak hand right now.
I feel vindicated for the last 25 years saying I didn't buy the Chinese data. Todd, go ahead.
Okay, my question for you, I mean, you have been talking ever since I've known you about the coming collapse of China. You have a book. But my question is, obviously, Xi Jinping is not going to go down without a fight. So does he currently have the ability, based upon his iron-fisted control of this country for so long, to quelch a rebellion like that?
Well, he does for now, but we have seen the Chinese people very volatile. So, for instance, that extraordinary series of protests starting in October 2022 just flared across the country. Uncontrollable. Now, the regime was able to put it back in the box after 2.5, 3 months. But this is a regime which I think is very worried because they can see that the Chinese people are really unhappy with what's going on. And I think Xi Jinping is not in command, or at least to the extent that most people think, because we're seeing a lot of dissension in the Chinese military where his loyalists are being sacked. If he doesn't control the military, his control over the party is then put in question, Todd.
Well, his health has been the big question. And we've saw those reports from last summer to now. And again, we can't get answers or facts because it's China. But we also saw those reports last summer about him. Before you go really quick, they're pledging support for overseas students at Harvard. The Chinese are. Because, of course, President Trump revoked the university's ability to enroll international students. This because, remember, there was evidence showing repeated collaboration between the faculty and the Chinese Communist Party, not just at Harvard. We saw this out of Stanford. And then, of course, Harvard hosting members of the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps. They're under sanctions from the United States. This is appalling to me.
Yeah, Harvard's actions are unjustifiable. And the one thing here we have is an underreaction by American presidents to China's infiltration of American institutions, especially Harvard. And Harvard's been about the worst offender here. So, you know, people at Harvard are probably going to think through this, and they need to get these Chinese institutions and break these links.
Yeah, because, again, how many Chinese students do you have that are paying top dollar? That means American students don't get those spots in these universities.
Absolutely. And when it comes to STEM subjects, this is really important because we need American engineers. We need American mathematicians and technicians, and we're not training our own people.
1,000%, Gordon. It's great to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much.
Enjoy your 3-day weekend. If you take breaks, I don't think you do, but if you
He's
ever
a
took a day
lawyer.
off,
He never takes
I don't think he
I'm
takes
not a
off.
lawyer. It's just that we've got a big regime that we're contending against.
Thank you, Gordon.